All right, good evening, everyone. Hopefully, everyone is having a good, decent to good day slash week. You work. Hopefully, you had a shortened week as we were uh, barbecuing on Monday, so that should be good. Let's look at chapter 10. We're already in the next section of this book. If you notice, they're doing, well, actually, sorry, this is the last chapter before the next section of the book. If you notice, they're breaking this up into sections. If you look at page, well, Roman numeral 3, the detailed content, you'll see right now we're in the story of John the Baptist, Jesus' birth and early days. And in 2 weeks, we'll be in Jesus' first trip to Jerusalem after he began his ministry. We go back and forth throughout the Gospels, grabbing scriptures for Bible study or sermon topics and things like that. But when you look at it linearly, it's interesting because you'll notice that Jesus went to Jerusalem, which is the main city, the city where he's going to end up being nailed to the cross multiple times. So he's going in and out of countryside to the city, the northern part to the southern part. So right now we are in the first section, the end of the first section. There's 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 12, 18, I believe 19 or 20 broken down sections, the way they have these. So this one is what we have been alluding to for quite some time about the miracles. I think somebody had mentioned that it was already miraculous that he knew what some of the apostles were thinking when he called them. Nathaniel was underneath the tree, so those were miraculous events. But from outside looking in terms of jump starting his ministry, this feast is a big deal, which is on page 27. So let's look at lesson number 10. Let's turn to John chapter 2. And someone can just read for us verses 1 through 11.
And the third day there was a marriage in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. And both Jesus was called and his disciples to the marriage. And when they wanted wine, the mother of Jesus said unto him, They have no wine. Jesus said unto her, Woman, what have I to do with thee? Mine hour is not yet come. His mother said unto the servants, Whatsoever he said unto you, do it. And there were set there 6 silver pots of gold, after the manner of the purifying of the Jews, containing 2 or 3 firkins apiece. Jesus said unto them, Fill the water pots with water, and they filled them up to the brim. And he said unto them, Draw out now and bear unto the governor of the feast. And they bear it. When the ruler of the feast had tasted the water that was made wine, and knew not whence it was, but the servant withdrew the water new, the governor of the feast called the bridegroom and said unto him, Every man at the beginning doth set forth the wine, and when men have well drunk, then that which is worse, but thou hast kept the good wine until now. This beginning of miracles did Jesus in Cana of Galilee, and manifested forth his glory, and his disciples believed.
All right. Anyone can come later and take a look. I pulled up this map of where Cana is. It's basically outside of, it's to the northeast of Nazareth. It's to the west of the Sea of Galilee, right? So in between the Sea of Galilee, which is on the east, and Nazareth, which is to the west of the Sea of Galilee, Canaan is there, but it's closer to Nazareth. Okay, so let's see what we have here. Somebody read for us the first 3 paragraphs on page 27.
After Jesus had been baptized by John the Baptist and tempted by Satan, Jesus returned to Galilee. One of the first things he did when he got back to Galilee was to attend the wedding feast at a place called Cana. Cana is thought to have been located between the Sea of Galilee and the Mediterranean Sea. Jesus and his disciples were invited to the wedding feast, as was his mother Mary. Mary felt responsible that things went well at the wedding feast. So when the wine ran out, she said to Jesus, They have no wine. Jesus, however, did not seem to think it was his or his mother's responsibility to be concerned about the wine. He said to her, Woman, what does that have to do with us? John 2:4a, and then it's Jesus addressed his mother as woman, which sounds gruff to us, but it may have been nothing more than a playful response on his part. Jesus seems to have thought that his mother was asking him to perform a miracle, for he said to her, "My time has not yet come." John 2.
Great. And someone read for us the last two paragraphs on page 27.
Yet, in spite of all of the fact that he might rush his schedule to perform a miracle so early in his career, Jesus allowed his love for his mother to influence his timetable. Mary was doubtless accustomed to relying upon Jesus, her eldest son. She seemed to know that he would do something about the shortage of wine. So she said to those that were serving, "Do whatever he tells you." John 2:5. Now there were 6 stone jars standing around, which held water for ritual washing. Each of these jars held 20 to 30 gallons of water. Jesus told the servers, "Fill up the jars with water," and they filled them up, and he told them to dip out some of the water and take it to the banquet master.
Great. Now somebody get us to just read the rest until thought questions on page 28.
They did as Jesus had said, and the banquet master tasted it, not realizing where it had come from. The servers, however, knew where it had come from. Then the banquet master took the bridegroom aside and said to him, "Everyone brings out the choice wine first, and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. But you have saved the best till now." John 2:10, NIV. This was Jesus' first miraculous sign. It showed his glory and caused his disciples to believe in him all the more. John 2:11. Not long after the wedding feast at Cana, Jesus went down to Capernaum and stayed there a while. His mother and his brothers went with him. His disciples went with him as well. John 2:12. Capernaum was below the level of the Mediterranean Sea, and it was a pleasant place to spend the winter. It is comforting to think that Jesus began his ministry in a pleasant and leisurely fashion before the rush of events overtook him. As spring came, however, when it was almost time for the Passover, Jesus went up to Jerusalem, John 2:13, as had been his custom since childhood.
All right, let's go back, just flip back to page 27. Let's dive through this just from a social setting first and foremost, right? Because this is not a religious setting. Now, there's no separation between culture, religion, or state with Israel, right? So we do understand that. But this is a different setting. There's a cross-reference verse that we need to quickly just touch on. When you look at this, John chapter 2, somebody read for us Hebrews 13:4. 13:4. Now it's interesting that this verse we're about to read is written to Jewish Christian audience. That's why it's called Hebrews. But what does Hebrews 13:4 say about marriage?
Marriage is honorable among all, and the bed undefiled, but fornicators and adulterers God will judge.
Okay, so the latter part is what most people want to jump to because that's talking about sin, and we do a lot of telling people what not to do. But the first part is giving you what indication of how Jewish people viewed weddings. Everyone, not just the two people getting married. Right? Because the author is telling this to Christians that marriage is what?
It's honorable.
Honorable. Some people don't believe you should have weddings, you should have birthdays, you should have celebrations, right? Honorable mean what? What does honorable mean? Right? Marriage is something that is celebratory, right? It's something that should be honored and revered and respected, even in your New Testament setting. Again, it's interesting that that's written to Hebrews because that already happens that way. Marriage as a custom, almost anywhere in the world or in a lot of places in the world have this same kind of thing where the ceremonies are different, but it's usually a celebration, right? in Indian culture, they celebrate weddings for like 3 days. Like, so this a whole weekend, right? Other cultures do it for longer. Some cultures do it where you have to go to a certain part of wherever the family is from. It's a lot of different variations, right? Here, this was a community. This is outside of the city. So remember, these are small villages and small towns. So everybody know everybody. This isn't a city with 1 million+ people. So there's a wedding, and who gets invited? Because it's hard to crash weddings, right? Probably not a good idea. But these people caught invitations, which were who?
Mary Jesus.
So mother of Jesus is written in John. We know her name to be Mary. She was there. And who else in verse 2? So Jesus and his friends, right? Remember, from the outside looking in, these are your friends, right? I don't know you as a teacher, so I don't know you to have disciples, right? Because did his ministry start? No, unless you were in the wilderness around where John the Baptist was, and you heard that this was the Lamb. I don't know. I just still know you as Mary and Joseph's son, right? So you're invited, your mom's invited, and then his friends get a +1 invite, right? Because they are, some of them are in the same area, so some of them could have caught their own invitation. But again, this is communal, this is family, this is not a city vibe. This is a smaller village vibe, right? So all of them were invited, John says in verse 2. Then we have a structural change in terms of the group, right? What runs out? The wine. Now, in this, you can read this later. Some of this is a blending between modern Jewish culture and biblical Hebrew culture. But this concept of the wine was a big deal of the wedding, not to drink in excess necessarily, but because the wine was a big deal for holy holidays. And this is an honorable thing, right? So this combination of what you're doing before God and the wine was a big deal. This wasn't a little deal. Like today, you may go to a wedding. Sometimes they may have an open bar, a cash bar. It's not that big of a deal unless there's drinkers there and they say, hey, man, why you had a cash bar? Why you didn't have open bar? But if you don't drink, it's not a big deal to you today if they have drinks flowing or not. But in terms of the Jewish and Hebrew culture, wine played a big deal in the ceremony of events, not just in the I do's, in this whole ceremony. So if you ran out, this is a big deal. This would be like, for our equivalent, I don't know what it would be like. If you ran out of cake, some people feel some way. If you don't have enough wedding cake, if you ran out of food, nowadays people may feel some way. But because our ceremonies are in and then it goes to the reception, it's not really the same correlation. You have to be from another culture to see, like, when you see the ceremony blending, like going on, not just once we do the I do's, we go from the church or the altar and then everybody sit down. We call you by tables or have a buffet. A DJ is playing. We done switched to the reception. Here, receptions are way longer than the wedding. But in other cultures, the reception and the wedding kind of all blends together. The wine is a key part. There's a part where the groom and the bride are doing things with the cup, where the rabbi is doing things with the cup. If the wine ran out, there is no wedding. It's like if you forgot the wedding ring. Like there is no wedding without the wine because it's such a big part. So when this ran out, who in verse 3, who took notice out of Jesus, his mother, and his disciples, according to verse 3? The mom said to him specifically what? Okay, Jesus' response was what? What does wine have to do with me? And let me dial back. What do them running out of wine have anything to do with me? Yeah, go ahead.
So during this time in Jewish culture, weddings lasted for about a week. So just imagine if you had an event that lasted for a week. I mean, we would run out of food in a day at a cookout, right? But imagine having this feast that lasts for a week, and then all of a sudden there's no wine. So you mentioned it's like not having cake or wedding cake, and I know most of us could relate those of us who have had events or responsible for them, especially in your home, the last thing you want to do ever is run out of food, right? Unless you only plan for a certain amount, but you never want to run out. In this particular case, it would be like humiliating for the bride and the groom because you've got a long festival or feast that's going on and there's no wine. So when Mary took notice, it was a big deal because that meant that all of the guests that were there would start talking about the bride and the groom and what was going on. So to keep things calm, she went to Jesus. Now, she knew Jesus could do something. I don't know if she knew what he could do, but she knew that he could do something, whatever that was. I know that she couldn't send him to the store to get any, but she knew he could do something.
Right. Oh, that's a good point. Also, think of this the way it's written, like from a literary standpoint, right? Because if you do anything in English class, the flow of words matter. John mentioned who is here first in verse 1 and 2. Of the Jesus, Mary, and disciple characters, John mentioned who was invited, right? So it shouldn't be, because see how the book is saying that Mary felt responsible that things went well at the wedding feast. The author is getting that based off of the flow of how John wrote this, like saying like Ellis was invited and also Kuman and Deb. But if you mention Ellis first, as a reader, you're assuming like Ellis was invited. Maybe the rest was just invited because they kind of know Ellis. But so if something happened and then the book said, then Ellis felt responsible, we would be like, oh yeah, because you told me he was you alluded to the fact that he was invited first. So just wanted to throw that up. Yes.
And it's funny, verse 5, it seemed like she knew the party. She knew the participants, and she was giving orders, so to speak. His mother said to the servants, whatever he say to you, do it.
Right.
So this had to be a party of influence, or at least Mary was one of the higher people on the list, because she wouldn't have been able as a woman to tell somebody what to do at their own party. I mean, wedding. I mean, she had to have known the groom, been very well acquainted with the family for her to speak and say something publicly like that.
Yeah, because she was very comfortable. We had a cookout Monday. Some of us had guests, right? Guests not going to be grabbing something off the grill, telling somebody what to do. Because what would you say? It's my church. You just a +1. So you tell your guests, see? Guests not going to be like, hey, man, y'all don't got no Kool-Aid. Y'all ran out of cheese. You'll say, oh, the church won't even have to get involved, right? You'll be like, wait, what are you talking about? Right? You just my only +1. You barely got an invite. So the way that she was talking seemed very comfortable. Remember, family, communal setting, right? All of that makes the foundation of this story if we look at it from a social setting and not just from, hey, this is something we remember as Jesus turning water into wine. Before we get to the water into the wine part, just look at the setting. The setting is very communal, family, and familiar as the foundation. It seems like most of these people know each other, which is how weddings flow, right? It's very awkward if you have strangers at a wedding, because how you going to be happy for me if you never met me, right? So it's just weird. So this is a very familiar setting, right? So when this concept of Mary being comfortable, taking responsibility, all of that goes into her mind of thinking, right? And when she says to Jesus, hey, do something, that do something, we also have to make implication, because do something is not like if somebody said, hey, do something today, we mean go to the store, right? So if we say, hey, we didn't have propane, go to the store. Nobody was expecting you to summon propane out of the air and put it into the grill, because we got a store. So that just means go to the store. But there is no store, right? There is nowhere to go. So that must mean do something. Do what? And now later on in Jesus's ministry, there's going to be somebody who's going to say, if you can do something,
Yes.
right? Do something like what? That's why I say about prayer requests, you asking what? Right? Like, remember, we sometimes be like, hey, God, if you could do something, do what? What do you mean? It's something I could do anything. So that's really not a good question. What you asking me to do? Some of us, if you can't be specific with your God, it's going to be difficult to have a relationship with him. Some people are that way, right? You asking for what? What are you asking for, right? One time this homeless guy was just asking for money. I rolled down the window, gave him $1. He said, man, if you gave me 5, I could make it. So I gave him 5. You know why? Because he asked for 5. Somebody was in the car said, make what? I said, I don't know. He just asked for $5, so I gave him. Because if somebody want $5, they should have asked. Because maybe somebody like me would give 5. But if all you took was $1, I assume what? You go with that $1. That's how raises work with work. Don't be at a job where they tell you we don't give raises. That may be for the rest of the floor. But you tell them, look, this don't work for me. I need some money. If they value enough, hush-wise, they will pay you. At my job, they always tell me, hey, don't tell the other people how much you make. Because I don't know what they made. I just know when it was time to negotiate for me, because I was hired from a business contract and they asked me to come on full time. So therefore I was like, so you asking me to stop doing some other thing and gotta pay money. Now I can't be like, well, what about everyone else's feelings? How much they making? That have nothing to do with me. So you have to be specific when they're gonna ask, what do you want to make here? Don't be like, well, if you could do something, maybe a couple. Employers love people like that because they'll say, oh, okay, I'll do it for you. Then you, oh, thank you. That's just like Oliver Twist, just asking, oh, more, please. You got to be asking people what you want, right? The squeaky wheel gets the oil. So do what? You asking me to do what exactly? Something miraculous, right? That's what the author is saying when it says, it sounds like the third paragraph seems to have thought his mother was asking him to perform a miracle, for he said, my time has not yet come, right? It's like you ask somebody, say, hey, can you run and pick up some propane for the picnic? And I said, my check has not yet come. That means what? I don't have no money. So you got to ask somebody else. Because I assumed once I got to the store, you didn't want me to steal propane for a church picnic, right? So I had to buy it. See how we knew these assumptions normally in our regular conversations. That's what I'm saying is look at this from what John is writing like a book, and then it will be clear on what these assumptions are of why this is a big deal, because Mary must have known that Jesus had some ability to do something, or she never would have asked him that. Just like I assume if I send you to the store, I hope you got some money, or I'll give you the money, or some means of transportation or something like that, or I never would have asked you that, right? I'm not going to ask somebody homeless, hey, can you run to the store? They're going to say, first run. I don't have no money, no car, no, right? You only going to ask those that you know are able to do something. So this is what she knew he can do. We don't know, because we spent a lot of time in this book going through Jesus as a kid and as a young adult and as an adult, but looking at it from what the Bible said and showing how it kept talking about revealing things or his time not there or the Spirit coming upon him. All those things seem like a growth process to get to this conscious divinity of Emmanuel, God with us. So we already went through that. That's why the author is making a big deal now to make it where his mom knew he had some abilities, but do we think Jesus was flying around the house as a young kid? No, probably not, right? But you may have had that inclination before we started this class. That's why the author is saying, somebody had to hear. Yes.
Yes, and I was saying that to your point, they must have trusted Mary because she didn't buy the wine.
Mm-hmm.
She made it. She got Jesus to make it.
Yeah.
Basically, so there must have been a lot of trust or knowledge of Jesus and Jesus' power, because the bridegroom didn't even question it. They actually drank the wine, right? We didn't read that they did not use it or
they didn't
anything
throw
like
it
that,
away.
right? Or they threw it away or nothing like that. So if you think about it, just out of the clear blue sky, this woman orders the wine to be made, and it's made and it's there. So there has to be that also confirms that they have to be very close or familiar with each other or related or something.
Right.
For them not to even question it, because you're not going to just take wine from anybody.
Yeah, that's true, right? That's like when you go somewhere and you got your plate, somebody put food in, you don't want that food, but you being nice. And then later, when you put the plate in the garbage, how you put the plate so nobody can see like this, right? Because you appreciate that blessing, but you don't want that, right? They didn't do that. They drank that, and it was so good, which we'll get to in a minute. But that's kind of connects this comment here, talking about like how comfortable she was that they even listened to her. And when they seen this water in the wine, I mean, if I was there, I'd be like, man, pass me a cup of that, because I never seen that. I mean, if you could turn water in the Coke or water in the lemonade, I'll be happy. You would impress me with that. So this is something that people bought into because of this community relationship. Just spending more time on Mary, because it's just giving you a foundation of how much of a family atmosphere this was. Yes.
So this kind of miracle was the work of Jesus' destiny. He used those miracles throughout after this,
Yeah.
but he hadn't started that yet.
Mm-hmm.
But to do this for his mom, he did this for his mom.
Yeah, right. Like he did for his, and the author touches on this, his love for his mom. This has nothing to do with spiritual ramification, ministry, salvation, heaven, hell, coming to give you life more abundantly. This has nothing to do with it, right? This is literally out of the kindness of your heart, because your mom is asking you. This has nothing to do with him dying on the cross. So it's interesting that his love for his mom extended to this way. And we'll get to that in a second. That's a good point.
That's why I said when we were back in chapter 7, Mary and Jesus' relationship, and the author said that this was her eldest son. Jesus had to be something that was extremely out the box, or he had to be something that Mary contemplated when he did things. Like for him to say, "It is not my time yet," we can very well say, what time is he talking about? You know what I'm saying? Because this is mom. Every mother knows when there's something wrong with her child. They know if he got some problems with his gross motor skills, he's slow being potty trained, he's not formulating his words right. Mama know that. And so, like I said, either he had to be extremely different, where Mary looked at him a couple of times, or the Holy Spirit, what the Holy Spirit said to her in the beginning, kind of led up to some of the things that he did do. Because for him to be a grown man and say, "This is not my time yet," that relationship had to be a little bit more closer than that with his ability. That's what I see. I see it that way because I know how I know how my mom was with me. Mothers know your ability and your inability. And if you were a gifted child, mama knows that. Because just imagine, by now, Mary has had how many more children? So with that being her oldest son, there's no way in the world James and the rest of them was acting like Jesus. On a good day, they wasn't acting like Jesus. So imagine a grown man, because Jesus is a grown man now, he's not a kid anymore.
Yeah, he's 30.
So Jesus could be saying something to Mary or talking to her, hugging and kissing her, talking about something, and Mary just looking at him like, oh shoot. So for her to say that, for him to say back to his mom, "It's not my time yet." I mean, okay, but you have been lovingly strange, son, from day one when I was carrying you in my womb. Okay.
And also the time that has gone by since he was a kid, we already looked at several scriptures in different times where time had went by, where it kept saying that the Spirit was ministering to him and he was growing day by day. The growing is maturated now. That means mature. He's 30. His ministry about to start. Whatever was brewing in him physically, right? The combining of Jesus's physical and his divinity is now the same. See, that's the thing, because the Spirit and God kept working in him. It kept saying, remember, it was talking about that from a baby. Then it talked about that when he was baptized. Then it talked about that. Remember, after the temptation, the angels ministered to him. And like those sort of things have been happening over decades. Now his ministry about to start. So whatever has been maturing and changing in him, it's like for a lack of a better analogy, when you watch some hero movie, and they start out and they have something in them, but they don't have tools, right? It's the difference between talent and skills, right? People have talent, God-given talent. There's people in the subway that can sing great. They don't have skills of making a song and performing, right? That come with practice. It's people on the playground that play basketball great as God-given talent, but they don't have skills to run an NBA offense because that comes from practice, right? It's a difference between God-given talent and honed skills. Now, Jesus's talent and skills are the same because he has been maturating over 30 years. That's why his ministry didn't start yet. So his abilities and his intent, Mary knew his intent for sure based off of their interaction. That's why his response to her as woman is something that people, depending on the level of interaction you have with loved ones, you have whatever kind of non-formal response for your mom or dad or aunt, uncle, or things like that, where someone else may look and be like, "Oh, that's kind of weird." But each family have their interaction like any kind of way, right? Like, for example, if you out with friends like here and we're laughing and joking or something, then somebody's friend who's just a plus one, they start laughing extra hard. You thinking, I mean, that's not that funny because you don't really know me like that. This just for the group, the core, right? You just plus one, you just smile, giggle, don't bust out laughing, right? Oh, remember when little Ellis was doing, I'll be like, well, you laughing too hard because you don't know anything about that. They know about that, right? So these are family interactions. That's why I like that the author took the time to address the woman response, and then the my time has not yet come. And then this concept of in 4th paragraph, in spite of the fact that it might have rushed his schedule to perform a miracle so early in his career, Jesus allowed his love for his mother to influence his timetable. Mary was doubtless accustomed to relying upon Jesus, her eldest son. She seemed to know that he would do something about the shortage of wine. So she said to those that were serving, do whatever he tells you. Okay, anything else before we move on to the actual wine part? Yes.
So 30 was in that time age of maturity. David was 30.
Yeah. Even though he was anointed as a boy, remember David was a boy when he came out to Goliath, and what did he say? Hey, how come y'all making such a big deal about this? Remember? And just as a side note, David had his stone and his extra stones. You know what them extra stones was for? Goliath had brothers. So David was prepared, but he couldn't figure out why everyone was so scared of them. Remember, he was like, we are the children of God. This was a kid. He was in a field. Remember the people kept coming every day to see. He was living his life. So he figured, I got one, I got some extra, but he didn't need the extra, right? Because when you knock the biggest bully down, the rest scatter, right? Strike the shepherd, what does sheep do? Run. So that's an interesting correlation in terms of time. Some other hands were up.
It's kind of, I say it's special because look at the times when she couldn't find him. He didn't know where he was at. He wasn't out there playing with other kids. When they did find him, look what he was at. He was at a temple teaching, and everybody's sitting there listening. So at that point in time, they had to realize there's something special about this young man growing up, because now he's in a temple teaching, and everybody's sitting there listening, comfortable, and not worried about anything else.
Yeah, that's true, right? There's past examples of his interaction where that difference started to shine. Good. Someone else? Yes.
So I think when Jesus calls her, because when I looked at this before, I used to think when he said woman, like that term. I mean, that's nothing that we would say today, not in this context like this. But I think it must have been a term of endearment of some sort because Jesus calls Mary woman at the cross when he says, woman, behold thy son. So it must have been a term of endearment, something that he was used to saying to her, not like we may look at it as kind of disrespectful
Right.
in this day and time if you were addressed that way. But I think for them it was more maybe a term of endearment.
Right, and
that's how Jesus refers to
That
it.
at the cross is a big deal because Mary had other sons and daughters. Right?
Right.
Jesus is, and again, this is like high level, I call it like spiritual nerd, meaning like you going deep in. Jesus, when he's dying, like literally life leaving his body, on his soul, not his physical, on his soul, right? And on his spirit, right? His spirit, not like we have a soul that God gave us. His divinity spirit, whatever that means, he is becoming sin for past, present, and future. Now, that alone we can't even contemplate. But as I'm losing consciousness, I take that and pause that and come back into the physical and say, hey, John, who's writing this book, hey, woman, that's your son now. And hey, son, that's your mom now. Then I go back to becoming sin for mankind. Like when you start looking at Jesus's ability to think of those around him, that's why I say as men, it's harder for you. Don't be macho, because you got plenty of examples where as a man, you fail every day as a husband, as a father, and definitely at church. Because we don't even notice if somebody here or not. Jesus becoming sin and still thinking of somebody else. Sometimes we don't know where our last name is. Hey man, where's your kid, your wife, your this? Oh, I was too busy stuffing my face. So you're not there. Remember when it was time for war to Israelites? Some people drink it like this. And what God said, no, those can't use those because why? Their face is down here. That's some of us as men. God said, can't use you. You eat it. You're too busy eating hot dogs. I needed somebody to look around. So when we see that, his interaction with his mom is special because we can see another example at the foot of the cross where he has more than a lot on his mind, right? I don't have time to start thinking about what's going to happen to physical people because I'm becoming sin as a sacrifice for all people. But he still was able to do both. Okay, anything else before we go to the wine part? All right. Now it says, now we're in the bottom of 27. Now there were 6 stone jars standing around. They were empty. They were being held for ritual washing of hands. Okay. Each of these jars had 20 or 30 gallons of water. Jesus told the servers, fill up the jars with water. Then they filled them up. Then he told them to dip out some of the water and took it to the banquet master. They did as Jesus had said. The banquet master tasted it, not realizing where it had came from. The servers, however, knew where it had came from. Then the banquet master took the bridegroom aside to him and said, now let's look at this. I'm going to read verses 9 and 10. When the master of the feast had tasted the water that was made wine and did not know where it came from, but the servants who draw the water knew, the master of the feast called the bridegroom. Now, the bridegroom is the male or the female, because we don't talk this way in 2019. Right? We just say the groom and the bride here in this part of the world. The bridegroom was the male. He called for the groom and said to him, every man at the beginning sets out the good wine. And when the guests have well drunk, then that which is inferior, but you have kept the good wine until now. And then it says, this was Jesus' first miraculous sign. It showed his glory and caused his disciples to believe in him all the more. John 2:11. This beginning of signs Jesus did in Cana of Galilee and manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him. Now, let's start at the bottom and go back. We know why the disciples were wild by this, because they were wild that he knew what they were doing earlier in the day or the day before. Remember, he was like, you guys excited over this. You about to see heaven open up. So it don't surprise me that they're excited, because I told you I would be excited. You didn't even have to change this to wine. You could have turned this to Coca-Cola, and I would have been like, man, I knew I picked the right person to follow, because you would have wowed me off of that. So it's no surprise to me that they were in off of this miraculous thing. Now, let's go to the beginning, right? Mary says what she says. It's not my time. Out of love, he still does something. What does he do? There were these 6 water pots of stone. They can hold like 20 or 30 gallons apiece. That's a lot of water, and that's going to be even more wine, right? Because you might have just a wine bottle is this much. And you notice wine bottles aren't 2 liters. Like soda is a 2 liter, go to 3 liters, right? Because I need a lot of soda. But just a wine bottle, not that much, and the bottle say milliliters, because you don't need that much. Because why? Well, just a couple glasses, what's going to start happening? Because I could just keep drinking soda. Only thing going to happen is I'm going to get full and have to go to the bathroom. But if I keep drinking wine, what will happen to me? Oh, baby. Oh, right? So only need a little bit. We got 20 to 30 gallons times 6. So this is a lot. So when they transition this and they switch this over, what happens? Right? What happens once walk me through this process of the wine, right? He fills up the water and then what?
$120 to $180 gallons. That is, so remember I said during this time, right, the weddings did last, they could last up to a week. So I guess maybe if everybody's drinking every day and depending on how many people that are there, maybe you need that much wine, but that's a lot.
So if you showed up, let's say plus
That's
12.
like an open bar.
You got a +1 and you show up with 12. Already I'm thinking, well, I only invited Ellis. Now he got 12 more people. But then somebody said, hey man, I don't know what happened, but Ellis brought 30 gallons of wine. I'll be like, you more than covered your 12 guests, right? Because this part, we about to have a wedding for the 2 weeks. We extending past the 1 week. But before we get to that the miracle happened in the transformation, right? Like that's the part where we were talking about Sunday even, right? The miracle in your life happens in the transformation, not in complacency, right? Some of us keep every day saying, God bless, praise God, but we're not transforming. So what are we praising? What in our life did God do that we're praising? Because God said, I make all things new. Bible says I'm new how often? Every morning. See, the miracle is in the transformation, not in the calling you to be saved one time. That's not a miracle in and of itself. The miracle wasn't calling the disciples. The miracle was in transforming them for 3.5 years. So the miracle was not in filling up the water. That was just going through the motions. The miracle is in the transformation. Salvation is not in just the believing. See, just the hearing, just the repenting, just the confessing, or just in the baptism. The miracle of salvation is in the transformation, right? Those are just physical steps that complete and make a thing that we call a process, right? The food is not in the ingredients, it's in the transformation of the ingredients into something edible. So he miraculously transformed water into wine. Okay, enough on that. They take the wine out, they put it in, they bring it to the master of ceremony of the feast, which is who? Who is the master of this wedding feast from Jewish culture? Right, so in other cultures it's different. Sometimes the woman's family pays, sometimes the man's family pays. In America, it used to be the wife's family, right? I think that's long gone now, but it used to be that way. In Nepal, Dev, is whose family has to pay the money? The husband's? Which family in Nepal have to pay the other family something before the marriage is there? Is it, you told me this before, the husband's family have to give the gold or the wife's family got to give the gold?
Husband family has to give to wife.
Wife family,
Wife
right?
family.
Yeah, see, so different culture is different, right? Each person. And this is the master of the ceremony calls the male over and he says what to him is, hey man, this is your first thing. Maybe you don't realize. You got to put the good wine out first. When everybody good and drunk that and it's finished, then they don't care about the little cheap wine because they so happy that they had at that point, everything tastes good, right? Cookout is the same way. You just put out some meats first, some hors d'oeuvres, something. Once people get full, then we just giving you hamburgers, hot dogs. Those are fillers, right? Because you really already full. At that point, you just eating to be eating. Because you see food, you eating more. We're not gonna save steak for the end, lobster tail for the end, right? We just give a little bit. And usually when you do that, the good food is in small portions, right? You just have like a little bit of something and you just keep eating a little of a lot. And what happens? Oh, I'm kind of full now. Okay, good. Now I don't got to worry about giving each person a steak because I gave you a little bit of this, a little bit of that. This works in multiple ways, not just with wine, right? It just works as a concept. So when he was saying that, now we speak to what's being inferred here, right? What the master of the ceremony is saying is, this is way better wine than whatever we've been drinking for however many hours, minutes, or days. Why did you just now pull this out? Because the master don't know where the wine came from, so he assumed it came from who? The bridegroom or the groom that we will call him, right? But it came from Jesus. So his point was, if you planned this party the right way, why did you save this for now? And it's so much of it. Shouldn't you have put this out before? While he's saying that, the disciples are looking at it and saying, what? Wow, this was nice. Wow. Right? Man, I was kind of like, man, should I go back and be the fisherman? But now I'm good, right? So that was the miracle and how everyone perceived it. Okay, any comments or questions on that? Yes, and we'll come back
I was
around.
gonna say, culturally, so if you think about their culture, alright, so like in Jamaica, someone is getting married, everybody you know can attend.
Yep.
There's no formal like invitation, there's no limit, everyone that you know can attend.
Mm-hmm.
There is not gonna be a per plate, cost per plate, no, because somebody's buying the cow, somebody's buying the goat, somebody's killing the pig, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And everybody, the whole family is pulling it together. So what I'm saying, just imagine this culture that Mary's at the wedding already, and they could call 13 more people to come. Just imagine how much more other people could
Yeah,
come
yeah,
that could just come.
yeah.
You know what I mean? And they could just come because you can just come.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so if you think about, and also the fact that everything was kind of set up for this miracle, because how could you possibly run out of wine at a wedding of all things?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? They can run out of food, but wine, I mean, come on, that doesn't even make sense. Had there.
Yeah, right. Like it was not like we'll say a coincidence. Oh, it just happened to be the one wedding Jesus went to. They ran out of wine, and it just happened. We know somebody that can make some wine, right? Like these things are miracles for a specific reason and purpose, right? And that's what we're looking at it as. What was the purpose of this? Verse 11: the disciples seen it and what? Believed, right? Like they were convinced further. Whatever he is, we don't know yet, right? We just meeting him, but man, right? You want to leave? No, not yet. Let me see kind of what else, right? It's like when a movie start good. Hey man, want to go to another movie? No, I'm good right here. I just want to see kind of what this is going to show. So this is a big deal because it's an outward display in a very communal, off the grid area, not in Jerusalem, right? A very outward display where when Jesus leaves, think about this part, when he leaves this and goes to Jerusalem, this is the type of thing where a lot of people will talk about, right? This isn't like a little miracle where I heal one guy and then it's just like, well, I don't know, I don't believe you. Everyone who lips touch some of that wine can say, now I can tell you, I don't know about him. Remember when the guy got healed and he went to the temple and he look, I don't know nothing about Beelzebub and all this religious stuff y'all talk about. I just know my hand was like this kind of, and now my hand like this. That's how people would be here. Like, I don't know, I just know it was no wine, then it was wine, and it was great wine. This guy kind of good by us, right? This is the type of story that will spread like wildfire, right? Like we used to say back in the day, the grapevine. This is where the story, but man, Jesus showed up. He had 1,000 gallons of wine. By the time people tell this story, it's just, man, wine was flowing out the ground. What? Yeah, you missed the wedding. You should have came. That's how these stories get, because this is a outward miracle, right? This isn't just a contained thing. Yes.
And again, he's leaving. Imagine what the wedding planner is thinking when he hears at the end of the wedding, him and the bridegroom, he said, man, before I leave, Jesus did that. And the bridegroom say, Jesus who? Mary's son. You know what I'm saying? So you got a group of people knowing what happened, and bam, pot out. You got another group of people that are functioning off of thinking the bridegroom had something to do with that and just being a nice bridegroom. He's just treating his guests extra special. And then the wedding planner going to say, man, it was Jesus that did that. Jesus who? Mary's son? You know, and he could even say, you know, why am I wedding? Like what? So again, Jesus is going to go through this ministry, proving things, miraculously doing things. And then you jump on the Pharisees wagon, and you'll see why things didn't impress them. It's kind of like, you know, what you said, I think it was last Sunday, about the serpents. Pharaoh had magicians too. You know what I'm saying? So you kind of say, wow, you know, and he'll leave one group of people believing and mesmerized, and another group of people saying, wow, I missed that.
Because to that point in this story, the master, the bridegroom, and the servants, who knew where the wine came from? The bottom people. Remember, Jesus didn't walk up and make a big deal to the high people, right? He mesmerized the bottom people, the plus ones, his disciples, and the servants. So yeah, the Pharisees, sometimes they would hear about what Jesus was doing. Remember, the people be so excited, but the Pharisees were like, all right, so remember, people, sometimes it said Jesus, the people were pushing, remember, to get to him. Remember, the lady was coming down and she said, man, I can't reach. I just got to get on the ground. Then I'll crawl and touch the little bottom part of his clothes. But the Pharisees didn't care. They were not impressed. Remember, they invited him to the food and to their house. What they said? This guy don't even wash his hands. See, so the high people was never really impressed by Jesus. Only somebody came like a thief in the night. Hey, who's that? What? Speak up. That was it. Everyone else kind of was like, I mean, nice trick. They weren't wowed by what he was doing, but the regular people, the bottom of society people, this was mind blowing, right? So his ministry started in a way where everyone's experienced this miracle, but who was wowed, right? Like what we would say the lowly people were amazed. And he could have easily been like, hey, where's the master and the bridegroom? I need to talk to the people in charge. Hey, man, y'all ran out of wine. My mom had to come. But don't worry, I got y'all. Look. Whoa. But see, he never was making a big deal about the physical, miraculous things he was doing. He was making a big deal about people turning their hearts to God. That's why when he started preaching, some people said, oh, man, I forgot. I got somewhere to go. Peace. Because they just was there for the food and the miracles and the sideshow, right? They didn't know that this came with some change that they had to do. Oh, no, this is a hard saying. I got to go home. I forgot my mom's call. So like when we look at this, he could have easily gained fame by doing these things in the open. But his time was not yet. So he never made a big deal about these things. Yes, Sister Detrell will go.
I was going to say to your point that basically the bridegroom and the master, they could have provided the same thing,
Mhm.
but that wouldn't have been a miracle.
Right.
So it coming from Jesus made a miracle.
Right. They could have spent money to get great wine. Right. So that's not a miracle. That's called money. The miracle was that Jesus did it with the water and transformed it. That's why the servants, because the servants were the ones who filled the water up. So they know it was not even a grape in the bottom, because the basins were for washing your hands. Plus, he never touched these. He told us to do it. That's how the lowly people can attest. I can be a witness. This was a miracle. Jesus changed things in your life. So he wants you to tell your family and friends about what he did in your life. He can't convince your friends because they don't know him. They know you. You got to say, look, nobody touched me, only Jesus. That's the miracle. But you start telling people what your church do, that ain't no miracle. A lot of churches do good things, don't they? Don't a lot of churches do things in the community? That's no miracle. What did God do in your life? The servants can say, I filled the water up. So I know for a fact this was a miracle. The people who didn't see that could be like, nah, how do you know? Maybe you were mistaken. Maybe you were already drunk. See how God worked? He looking for the people that he changed to speak on what did God do for you. So that's a good point. Yes, brother.
So I think the net result was the wine that he brought joy to the party.
Yeah.
He must have had a great party.
Yeah, exactly. This was a miracle that was like, man, if Jesus do miracles all like this all the time, he never would have made it to the cross, because somebody drunk would have been like, you not taking this guy. Barabbas, take him. This guy is the life of the party.
Let's have a wedding every week.
Every week, let's have, who want to get married? You don't even meet each other. You two get married. Jesus, you busy? Right? So this was one of those things that were, again, very social. Just like if we do a big event, right? If we give out free food every day, church be packed. But once we start preaching and teaching, telling people change their ways, even people who don't got a watch will look at their wrist and be like, oh, I forgot I have somewhere else to be, because I just came because somebody told me y'all was giving out church plates. Now you want me to change my life. If Jesus just was giving out free wine, he never would have been crucified. Who want to kill somebody that giving out free wine? People be like, you could kill me before you kill the source of the wine. But it wasn't about the wine. It was about this, changing their hearts and freeing their mind, right? Sunday, I came to give life, not wine, and give it more abundantly. People just want to drink and drug their problems away. God is like, I didn't create you to be in no drunken or drug stupor. I created you to be able to have dominion over this world. See, I came to give life. You want to get drunk. Right? Different. I came to renew your mind. Renewing your mind take work. People say, nah, I'll take the wine and the drink. Drink away my problem. Then you wake up with a headache and a problem. Now you got two problems, a physical one and whatever problems you had. So we see this, look at it from a social standpoint. This is one of those things where it's outwardly people enjoyed it, right? People were able to be benefactors of it. He impressed the lowly people. He did what his mom asked out of love. This is a nice art to this, closing art to this first section here. Okay, anything else before we go? Yes, go ahead.
So it's amazing how true form of Jesus doing things in abundance, right? Just the amount of water that he turned into wine. It's always in an abundance, and he operates that way in our lives as well. It's never just the one thing, right? It's always above and beyond, more than you can imagine, right? Always overflowing. We should be grateful.
Oh, okay. He's writing. Okay. Yeah, this is.
I'm gonna say.
Okay. This concept is right overflowing, right? Like, hey, what did Jesus say? Seek first the kingdom and his righteousness. What? All these things he added to you. Remember Solomon? Hey, what do you want? Oh, I just really want some wisdom, the ability to discern right and wrong, because who can judge your people? He said, what? That's it? Well, because you asked for that, I'm not only going to give you that in abundance, the most ever, I'm going to give you also the other physical things in abundance, right? God does things that way so abundantly. don't limit the blessing that he can be in your life. Okay, good. Thank you for everyone's comments and discussion.